Dark Souls is a game whose speedruns have been constantly evolving for nearly 15 years. While some games stay relatively static in their speedruns, the landscape of Dark Souls speedrunning has been uprooted many times over the years, with discovery after discovery of new glitches and strategies that have completely changed the game. As a result of these new discoveries, the world record for the affected categories usually begins to drop soon afterwards as runners implement the new strategies. Some of the time saves are small, maybe 5 to 10 seconds. Some more significant, like 30 seconds, which is already an eternity for a speedrun. But others are massive, saving several minutes or even more. But which new discoveries save the most time? Hi, I'm Regole. I've been a speedrunner and leaderboard moderator for Souls games for over 8 years. And today I'll be guiding you through the 5 biggest time saves in Dark Souls speedrunning history, and how much they caused the associated world records to plummet as a result. Number 5. The first time save on our list is a classic, one of the oldest known skips in Dark Souls, known as Duke Skip. In the second half of the game, after placing the Lord Vessel, there's a scripted death on the first encounter with Seath. You're supposed to die in this room and then get transported to a prison area of the archives on respawn. Once here, you need to escape your cell, grab another key, and escape through the top of the prison area. And eventually you'll come back out to the main area of the archives, and then you can progress to the Crystal Caves where the real fight with Seath is located. Duke Skip, however, allows you to completely circumvent the side quest. At the top of this elevator, right before the first Seath encounter, you can do some specific movement to fall on top of the railing of the elevator after sending it back down. Then once you're on the railing, you simply roll onto this balcony where you can progress to the Crystal Caves, no death necessary. This saves approximately 3 minutes, which is an enormous amount of time for what is essentially a glitchless skip. Executing the Duke Skip has historically been more difficult to accomplish than it looks, but there's a new setup for it nowadays using a bow, which makes it very accessible to newer runners. This skip is so old that the only record that exists before its implementation was the very first Dark Souls any percent world record by the Japanese runner Twilight. This run is another story unto itself, but Twilight managed to finish the game in 1 hour, 22 minutes, and 25 seconds without using Duke Skip. The very next world record set was by another Japanese runner called Keita, with a time of 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 33 seconds. There are many reasons why this run saved nearly 15 minutes over Twilight's run, but Duke Skip is probably the biggest single addition. Nowadays, Duke Skip is utilized in many different categories and has been an important piece of Dark Souls speedrunning for over a decade. Number 4. If you thought skipping past Sin's Gate was impressive, we can go even further. The second major time save on our list is a staple of New Game Plus speedruns, Sin's Fortress Skip. As you could probably guess, this allows you to skip all the way past Sin's Fortress directly to Anor Londo. This powerful skip is only useful in New Game Plus categories for a couple of reasons. Primarily because you can start your runs with any amount of items carried over from a previous NG cycle without any of that prior setup counting against your time. This means you can start your run with a particular PvP item called the Purple Coward's Crystal already in your inventory. This unassuming item, obtained from the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, is normally used to exit the arena in the Battle of Stoicism, taking you to the coordinates just outside the arena near Artorias. Outside of the arena, this item is normally not usable. However, you can activate it using a glitch called an item swap, where you pre-use the item, you toggle off of a platform, then use a replacement item on the frame you land on the ground, which causes the crystal to activate as long as you have the DLC loaded. Well, it just so happens that the DLC is loaded in memory while in the Hydra's Lake, even if you don't have access with the broken pendant. Doing this item swap will cause the game to try and send you to these coordinates in the DLC allowing you to access the Oolacile Township without having to do any of the steps normally required to enter. However, there is a certain threshold of the Hydra's Lake you need to be located within for the DLC to be loaded into memory properly. So, what happens if you use the item swap glitch to activate the crystal, then move out of this threshold to unload the DLC? Well, the game kicks you to the main menu, unless you have performed an invasion since the last time you opened the game. In that case, the game attempts to send you to the map of the area you last invaded in, and since the coordinates of the Battle of Stoicism entrance do not exist within that map, it simply places you in the default location of that particular map instead. Why does the game fall back to the map of your last invasion point? Well, I honestly don't have a clue, but we can abuse this by triggering the La Trek invasion on another save file, which will cause the Anorlando map to be called after the DLC is unloaded. And as a result, the game will spit you out right at the beginning of Anorlando. Doing this essentially skips all of the time spent running from Undead Burg to Undead Parish, performing Sin's Gate skip, and then progressing through Sin's Fortress and taking out Iron Golem. Altogether, saving around 4 minutes total. Before the Sin's Fortress skip, the New Game Plus any % world record sat at 18 minutes and 33 seconds by Regole, yours truly. The very first world record completed with the skip was a massive drop of 3 minutes to a 14:37 by Set Booster. The current record for this category has managed to go all the way down to an incredibly low 11 minutes and 20 seconds, also performed by myself. Number 3. For many years of Dark Souls' existence, any route that went into the DLC to kill Kalameet had to go on a long side quest into Oolacile Township to obtain the crest key to unlock the door to Hawkeye Gough to have him shoot down the Black Dragon in order to actually enter into combat and vanquish the boss. Until it was discovered that you could realistically kill Kalameet while he's still flying in the air by doing a very specific pathing to bait out a particular attack that leaves him vulnerable while the player could himself avoid damage. This is what is known as Goughless Kalameet, or just Goughless. Initially, it was only thought to be capable with ranged attacks such as heavy magic spells to shoot Kalameet out of the sky. This would mean the new Goughless Kalameet strategy would save a lot of time, but only a couple minutes at best. However, before any new records could even be claimed, it was found that Kalameet's tail hitbox goes so low to the ground during this attack, it could even be hit with melee weapons. Thus was born the even more time-saving strategy of Melee Goughless Kalameet. Using a move-swapped Dragon Tooth plus 5, speedrunners could take out the boss with 3 cycles of attacks. This was actually slower than the strategy of shooting Kalameet with magic. However, it allowed the rest of the all bosses category routing to be completely transformed into an entirely melee route. Not only did this mean the enormous time save of skipping the crest key and Gough, but it also meant that you could avoid other things that the previous magic-based routes required. The biggest example of this was the addition of another skip called Township Skip, eliminating the need to go into Oolacile Township whatsoever because the crest key and dark bead were no longer necessary. With the addition of many other optimizations after the switch to a full melee route, the new Dragon Tooth plus 5 route saves around 5 whole minutes over the previous Black Knight Greatsword plus magic route that held the world record before. The previous world record in the category before the addition of Melee Goughless Kalameet was a 103:35 by Catalyst. With such a large reroute, it took some time before the new Dragon Tooth route was fully optimized, but after a couple months of grinding and practice with the brand new strats, the record was knocked down to a 101:17 by myself in December 2021. A short-lived competing route that used the Black Knight Greatsword made its impact soon after, with Catalyst grabbing the record back with a 101.02. With some renewed efforts, I came back and I pushed the record down all the way to 1 hour and 8 seconds, showing just how much potential the new route had and bringing the category close to a historic sub 1 hour achievement. The first runner to ever achieve this was the Brazilian legend Marionette with the 59.47 on September 4th, 2022.
Let's fucking go, dude! First sub hour! Let's go! Woo! And this run kinda sucked, but don't tell anyone.
Today, the current all bosses record sits at a 58.38 by the newcomer X Monkey. Although many new strategies have helped push this time down, it was almost all in thanks to the groundbreaking discovery of melee Goughless Kalameet that caused an upheaving reroute to the category. Number 2. Moving on to number 2 in our list, we finally have arrived at the heavy hitters of Dark Souls time saves. These next few strategies have saved a lot of time from speedruns over the years. And we start with the Purple Coward's Crystal Wrong Warp at 80%. Wrong Warps have existed in Dark Souls for a long time, but they were sheltered in their own category away from 80%, in a category called Kiln Skip, because the methods used for the Wrong Warp were arguably a little controversial, relying on force quits to close the game during a warp. Because of this, any percent was traditionally a category without wrong warping for a long time, until a method was found to execute a wrong warp without a force quit using the Purple Coward's Crystal. This method is fairly similar to the one described earlier in the video for the Sin's Fortress skip, but without all the New Game Plus shenanigans. For most of the existence of this style of any percent run, the route was basically Sin's Gate skip to get the Dragon Tooth, and kill ONS, ring the 2 bells and place the Lord Vessel, kill the Hydra and free Dusk, then acquire the broken pendant from Duke's archives. Then, make your way to Artorias in the DLC and take him out. Once Artorias is down, you can pick up the crystal in the Battle of Stoicism right after. Then rest at the Lord Vessel to store your last bonfire position. Then you simply warp back to the DLC so the crystal can be activated with an item swap, which will attempt to send you to the entrance of the arena, but instead, you interrupt that warp with a Homeward bow or a dark sign. These conflicting coordinates from the Crystal Warp and the Bone Warp will cause the game to place you at the default location of the map you had previously rested at. For Firelink Altar, this default position just happens to be in the kiln of the First Flame, which allows you to go straight to the end of the game. There are many different styles of wrong warps in Dark Souls, but they all operate on this concept of making the game not have a suitable position to place the character, so it sends them to this default position instead. Previously, any percent had to go and kill all the Lord Soul bosses to place their souls in the Lord Vessel to access the kiln of the First Flame, requiring trips to many different areas of the game that can now be totally ignored. Even with the extra side quest of having to kill the Hydra and enter the DLC to kill Artorias, this new wrong warp saved around 9 minutes overall. After the discovery of this skip in late 2017, Capitaine Toinon lowered his own any percent record from 41.11 to a 38.55. But this was quickly lowered over the course of the next few months by several runners claiming the record, such as Capitaine, Nax HPL, and Siegewell. Before long, the record had settled at a 32.36 by Capitaine on January 3rd, 2018, a whopping 8.5 minute drop in just a few months. This route would be optimized further by many records from runners such as Catalyst, Sastutin, Minos DG, and myself. Ultimately, the Purple Coward's Crystal any percent route would settle at an impressive 29.54 by Catalyst on September 20th, 2020. However, the wrong warping time saves would not end there. At the end of 2020, another massive new time save would be found to shake up the category once again. This time, an even faster method of wrong warping would be discovered. Enter the Homeward wrong warp. The Homeward wrong warp ultimately works pretty similar to the Purple Coward Crystal warp in that you're causing the game to place you in the default position of the Firelink Altar map to skip into the kiln of the First Flame. However, the new warp was done by combining a brand new piece of tech called a spell swap with the Homeward spell and a nearby bonfire. Spell swapping from one spell animation to Homeward, it is possible to cast the spell but have your character move before the warp occurs. During this brief period of movement, if you rest at a new bonfire, the game will initiate a wrong warp to the map of your previous bonfire location. So you simply rest at the Lord Vessel, warp somewhere else, spell swap Homeward, and then rest, and boom, you're in the kiln of the First Flame. No longer having to do the DLC side quest, this Homeward wrong warp would save an additional 8 minutes off the any percent category. The same night this new method was discovered, the record was instantly shattered by over 3 minutes, going from a 29:54 by Catalyst to a 26:35 by Comedy. The run would be further optimized by several of the usual runners, such as Catalyst, Capitaine, and Sasterton, until settling at a 21:17 by Catalyst with the run performed on November 11th, 2020. In just a few weeks, the record had been lowered by over 8 minutes. After some new discoveries and optimizations, the record has been lowered even further by QQ all the way down to a 19:28 where it stands today. From a 40-minute speedrun to what is now under 20 minutes, the any percent category has been completely changed by the addition of wrong warps. When compared to the any percent no wrong warp category, which sits at 36 minutes and 39 seconds, you can see that altogether, this strategy saves more than 17 minutes. That is a whole lot of time. But even then, it's not the most amount of time saved in a Dark Souls speedrun. Number 1. Obtaining all achievements in Dark Souls is well known for the many items that are required to be farmed from enemies and bosses in the game. Before 2018, the speedrun route was no exception. Runners needed to not only farm certain special weapons for the Knight's Honor achievement, it also needed to farm a lot of materials to accomplish all the many goals in the run. From Covenant items such as Souvenirs of Reprisal, to Titanite slabs and chunks for upgrading weapons, to soul items for creating boss weapons. However, in late 2017, a new glitch was discovered that would massively change this category forever. Frampt duping via quantity storage. Frampt duping is one of the most powerful glitches to ever be discovered in the history of Dark Souls. This glitch allows you to duplicate most of the consumables and materials in the game, while also providing millions of souls on demand. Basically the dream of every all-achievement speedrunner. It works by placing an item in the bottomless box, then simply selling a quantity of that item that is higher than what you actually own. This can be done via another glitch called quantity storage, storing the quantity prompt from an arrow drop prompt, then overlaying a confirmation box over Frampt's feed menu. When you press no on the confirmation box, it allows you to inject this stored quantity into the feed prompt. From here, you can sell that stored quantity's amount of whatever item you have highlighted, which can not only give you a large quantity of souls, it will also cause an underflow to occur if that item is stored in your bottomless box. This underflow will cause the item to be duplicated to the maximum storage quantity of the item, which is typically 99. You can then repeat this process by selling 98 of that item again, then storing another quantity, usually of 999, using an arrow drop prompt, and then duplicating it again to 99. This can then give the player essentially infinite souls, especially when done with boss souls, giving millions for every round of dupes. The advantages are clear when it comes to gaining a massive amount of souls relatively quickly. But for all achievements, the main time save comes from duplicating a large number of important items. Titanite chunks of all colors, Titanite slabs of all colors, boss souls needed for boss weapons, and Covenant items needed for certain rewards. The world record before this glitch was found stood at 3 hours, 40 minutes, and 37 seconds by Nax HPL. Using this run, we can analyze all the many things that were made obsolete by Frampt duping. In this record, Nax spent about 5.5 minutes fighting bosses extra times to obtain additional boss souls for boss weapons, which would be skipped by dupes. There was also at least 8 extra minutes spent on farming extra Covenant items, mainly souvenirs of reprisal. There was additional time spent acquiring all of the Eyes of Death and Sunlight Talismans needed for the other Covenant rewards, but not nearly as much and harder to quantify, so we'll give Nax a pass and call it 8 minutes only. This would also be almost entirely avoided by simply acquiring a single one of these Covenant items and duplicating them with Frampt. There was also a whopping 19.5 minutes spent collecting Titanite slabs and Titanite chunks, from entering the DLC to acquire extra slabs, to farming crystal lizards in the Great Hollow for slabs, to killing Stray Demon for additional slabs, and farming Black Knights in the kiln for chunks. A lot of time was spent acquiring materials for the upgrade path achievements. Once again, nearly all of this time would be completely skipped, simply by acquiring one of these items and duplicating them with Frampt. And finally, Nax spent an entire 20 minutes in New Game Plus 2 in order to get the final boss weapons from Sif's Soul and trading in Gwen's Soul. This third New Game cycle could now be completely skipped simply by duplicating both of these boss souls via Frampt duping. Altogether, this adds up to a gigantic 53-minute time save from Frampt dupes alone. This is a rough estimate because there are many other factors at play that result from this routing change, but regardless, it is clear that this is probably the single largest time save in the history of Dark Souls speedrunning. The very first world record that was set after the discovery of Frampt duping was by Capitaine Toinon on December 27th, 2017, with the time of 3 hours, 1 minute, and 49 seconds. A massive 40-minute drop in the record right off the bat. The all achievements record would quickly be optimized further, with the runner This Is Prox pulling off the first sub 3 hour run in the category on January 13th, 2018, with the 2:58.46. Although the record would quickly go back into the hands of Nax HPL once again. New time saves in hand, with a time of 2 hours, 52 minutes, and 16 seconds on January the 16th. Over the span of 3 weeks, the record had been lowered by almost an hour. This category, as all the others, has gone through many additional time saves and optimizations over the years, with the current world record now sitting at a 2:08.36 by Master876, set on July 9th, 2023. That's all for me today. Don't forget, I'm Regole. I'm a longtime Dark Souls speedrunner, and I'm trying to get more involved with making long-form YouTube videos going forward. So if this kind of content interests you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and of course, leaving a like is also helpful. If you want to check me out on other platforms, I also stream on twitch.tv/Regole almost every weekday, so come by if you want to see some more Souls gameplay. And of course, thanks for watching.